Some voices are whispers waiting to become roars. When Amy Poehler walked onto the Tonight Show stage with that infectious energy and radiant confidence that had made her comedy's most beloved cheerleader, nobody expected her to reveal the most personal chapter of her childhood healing mission. Jimmy Fallon had planned a fun interview about Amy's latest project. The audience was ready for the boundless enthusiasm and empowering humor that always came with an Amy Poehler appearance. But what Amy was about to confess would silence Studio 6B and prove that sometimes the loudest voices come from people who remember what it felt like to have no voice at all. The cameras were rolling. The audience was already energized by Amy's magnetic warmth, and then she spoke 11 words that changed everything. I teach shy kids to be loud because I remember being invisible. What came next wasn't just television. It was a revelation about courage, transformation, and the sacred responsibility that comes with using your voice to help others find theirs. Amy Poehler had always been known for her fearless confidence and unstoppable energy, the performer who commanded stages with natural authority, who made leadership look effortless, who turned every room into a celebration. But what audiences didn't know was that Amy's powerful presence had been hard-won, forged from a childhood spent feeling invisible, overlooked, and too scared to speak up for herself in situations where her voice mattered most. The Brave Voice comedy classes had begun 7 years earlier, during a period when Amy was reflecting on her own journey from shy child to confident performer and wondering how she could help other kids make that same transformation without waiting until adulthood to find their courage. After volunteering at her children's school, Amy had been struck by how many bright, creative kids were struggling with social anxiety that prevented them from participating fully in their own lives. I started noticing these kids who had incredible ideas but were too scared to share them. Amy later explained. They'd sit in the back of the classroom with brilliant thoughts trapped inside because they were terrified of being judged, laughed at, or simply not heard. It reminded me exactly of my own childhood. Social anxiety affects roughly 7% of children at any given time, but for many kids, shyness goes beyond normal introversion to become a barrier that prevents them from forming friendships, participating in class, or advocating for themselves when they need help. These children often have rich inner lives and creative potential that remains hidden due to their fear of social interaction. Shy kids are often incredibly observant, empathetic, and creative, Amy said. They're watching everything, understanding social dynamics in sophisticated ways, but they're too scared to contribute their perspective. The world is missing out on their voices, and they're missing out on the confidence that comes from being heard and valued. Amy's own childhood had been marked by painful shyness that made simple social interactions feel overwhelming. Despite having loving parents and a supportive home environment, Amy had struggled to speak up in class, make friends, or assert herself in any situation that required social confidence. I was the kid who knew the answer but wouldn't raise her hand, Amy remembered. I had opinions, jokes, ideas, but I was so terrified of being wrong or looking stupid that I chose invisibility over participation. I spent most of elementary school feeling like I was watching life happen instead of living it. The transformation hadn't come until high school, when Amy discovered improvisational comedy and realized that performing gave her permission to be bold, funny, and confident in ways that regular social interaction didn't allow. Improv taught me that there were no wrong answers, that every idea had value, that taking risks was celebrated instead of punished, Amy reflected. For the first time, my natural energy and humor had a place to exist. Comedy became my bridge from invisible kid to confident person. Amy's first encounter with a severely shy child had been through her daughter's school, where she met 8-year-old Sophia, a bright third grader who hadn't spoken voluntarily in class for the entire school year, despite being academically gifted. Sophia's teacher was worried because she could see this incredibly intelligent child who was completely shut down socially, Amy recalled. Sophia would communicate through nods and gestures, but she was so afraid of saying the wrong thing that she'd rather say nothing at all. When Amy volunteered to work with Sophia one-on-one, she discovered a child with natural comedic instincts who was trapped by her own perfectionism and fear of judgment. Through gentle improv exercises, Amy helped Sophia realize that being silly, making mistakes, and taking creative risks could actually be fun rather than terrifying. Sophia started with simple yes and exercises where she couldn't give wrong answers, Amy explained. We played games where the goal was to be as ridiculous as possible, where making mistakes was celebrated. Slowly, Sophia discovered that her ideas were valuable and that other people enjoyed her sense of humor. From that breakthrough with Sophia, Amy had begun developing a structured program specifically designed for children whose shyness was preventing them from participating fully in their social and academic lives. Working with child psychologists and educators who specialized in social anxiety, Amy had created Brave Voice Comedy, weekly workshops where extremely shy children could practice social interaction through improvisation games, storytelling exercises, and confidence-building activities designed to feel more like play than therapy. Traditional approaches to childhood shyness often focus on pushing kids to be more social before they feel ready, Amy explained, but comedy gives them permission to experiment with different versions of themselves in a low-stakes environment where the goal is fun, not perfection. Over 7 years, Amy's Brave Voice Comedy program had reached 58 children ranging from age 6 to 14, all of whom had been identified by parents or teachers as struggling with shyness so severe that it was impacting their academic performance, social development, or overall well-being. These aren't just introverted kids, Amy clarified. These are children whose anxiety about social interaction is preventing them from participating in their own lives. They're smart, funny, creative kids who are trapped by fear. The program incorporated various improv-based techniques, yes, and exercises that built on every idea, character work that let kids explore different personalities, storytelling games that gave shy children scripts to follow, and group activities that required cooperation without competitive pressure. I worked with this 10-year-old boy named Marcus, who was so shy he would hide behind his mom during parent-teacher conferences, Amy remembered. Marcus had been held back a grade because he wouldn't participate in class discussions, even though his written work showed he understood everything perfectly. The breakthrough had come when Marcus discovered his talent for character voices during one of Amy's improv exercises. By speaking as different characters, Marcus could express his ideas without the vulnerability that came with using his own voice. Marcus started with robot voices, then moved to animal characters, and eventually found the confidence to share his own thoughts without hiding behind characters, Amy said. His teacher said it was like watching a different child emerge. Marcus went from silent observer to class participant within months. The approach worked because it addressed the root cause of severe childhood shyness, the fear that their authentic self wouldn't be accepted. By creating environments where authenticity was celebrated and mistakes were reframed as creative opportunities. When shy kids realize that their weird ideas are actually funny, that their observations make people laugh in good ways, that their perspective adds value to group activities, it changes their relationship with their own voice, Amy explained. The most profound transformations happened when children discovered that their shyness had actually given them strengths, observational skills, empathy, and creative thinking that enhanced rather than hindered their ability to connect with others. There was this 12-year-old girl, Emma, who came to me so shy she couldn't order food at restaurants, Amy shared with obvious pride. Emma thought her shyness made her weird and broken. Through our work together, Emma realized that her quiet observation skills made her an incredible improviser and storyteller. Emma's confidence breakthrough had come during a group storytelling exercise where her attention to detail and character development impressed the other kids. Emma realized that her shyness had actually made her a better listener and observer, skills that enhanced her creative abilities. Emma is now 15 and performs in her high school's improv troupe, Amy said with joy. She still considers herself naturally introverted, but she's learned that being quiet doesn't mean being voiceless. She uses her observational gifts to create characters and stories that make people laugh and feel understood. Several participants who had completed Amy's program had gone on to pursue theater, comedy, or other performance activities using the confidence skills they'd learned to overcome their social anxiety in academic and social situations. Tonight's appearance on The Tonight Show was supposed to focus on Amy's latest comedy project, which explored themes of female empowerment and finding your authentic voice. Jimmy had planned to discuss her approach to comedy writing, maybe get her to demonstrate some improv techniques, definitely tap into the infectious energy that made her such an inspiring guest. The interview had started with Amy's characteristic enthusiasm and warmth. She had shared funny stories about her current projects, discussed her approach to empowering comedy, and charmed the audience with her natural ability to make everyone feel included in her joy. But when Jimmy asked about Amy's work with young people and how she encouraged the next generation to find their confidence, something shifted in her expression. The question had been meant to explore her mentorship style, but it had touched on something much more personal that Amy had been considering sharing publicly for the first time. "You know, Jimmy," Amy said, her voice taking on unusual vulnerability, "I think a lot of people assume I've always been confident and outgoing, but the truth is I spent most of my childhood being so shy I was practically invisible, and that experience taught me something important about kids who are struggling to find their voice." The audience grew quieter, sensing that Amy was moving into territory that was more personal than her usual empowering energy. "You were a shy kid?" Jimmy asked with genuine surprise, given Amy's commanding presence. Amy was quiet for a moment, her usual rapid-fire enthusiasm replaced by thoughtful reflection. "Painfully shy, terrified of speaking up in class, making friends, being noticed in any way, and for 7 years I've been working with kids who are trapped in that same silence, teaching them that their voice matters through comedy and improv." The studio was completely focused on Amy's words now, the energy shifting from entertainment to something much more meaningful and personal. "Amy, you're teaching comedy to shy children?" Jimmy asked softly. Amy's eyes filled with tears, a sight that was particularly powerful coming from someone known for her unstoppable optimism and strength. "I'm teaching kids who feel invisible that they have something valuable to say, that their ideas matter, that being heard can actually feel safe and fun instead of terrifying." The audience was completely silent now, witnessing a side of Amy Poehler that transcended her comedy persona, the vulnerable truth of someone who had transformed her own childhood pain into healing for others facing the same struggles. "Jimmy, can I tell you about something that's taught me more about real courage than any comedy show I've ever done?" Amy asked, her voice growing stronger despite her tears. "Please," Jimmy replied, clearly understanding that something profound was being shared. Amy took a deep breath and spoke directly to the camera. "I run comedy workshops called Brave Voice for extremely shy children. 58 kids over 7 years who were so scared of being judged that they'd rather be invisible than risk being themselves." Jimmy's expression changed completely as he grasped what Amy was describing. "You're helping shy kids find their confidence through comedy. I'm helping kids discover that their voice has value, that their ideas can make people laugh and feel connected, that being authentically themselves is something to celebrate instead of hide," Amy replied with growing conviction. Tears were streaming down Jimmy's face. "Can you tell us about one of these children?" "Sophia was 8 when I met her," Amy said, her voice becoming tender. "She hadn't spoken voluntarily in class for an entire school year, even though she was incredibly bright and creative. She was so afraid of saying the wrong thing that she chose silence over participation." Amy paused, gathering herself to continue. "Through improv games and storytelling exercises, Sophia discovered that her natural sense of humor could actually help her connect with other kids instead of hiding from them." "What happened to Sophia?" Jimmy asked through his tears. Sophia is now 15 and co-captain of her high school's debate team, Amy said with obvious pride. She still considers herself naturally introverted, but she's learned that being thoughtful doesn't mean being voiceless. She uses her observational skills to create arguments and stories that persuade and inspire people. The audience was openly emotional, many people crying as they witnessed this revelation about Amy's private work helping invisible children become visible. Amy, how has this work changed your understanding of confidence? Jimmy asked. It's taught me that confidence isn't about being the loudest person in the room. Amy replied with quiet wisdom. These kids showed me that real confidence comes from knowing your voice matters, that your perspective adds value, that being authentically yourself, even when that self is quiet or thoughtful, is something the world needs. As the segment concluded, something unprecedented happened. The entire studio audience rose in sustained applause that lasted over 5 minutes. But it wasn't just appreciation, it was recognition of transformation, acknowledgement that they had witnessed shyness transformed into strength. Amy's revelation became one of the most shared Tonight Show segments in the program's history, inspiring conversations about childhood social anxiety, the importance of inclusive education, and the power of comedy to build authentic confidence. Most importantly, Amy's disclosure had shown that sometimes the most important performances happen not on stages, but in quiet rooms where invisible children learn that their whispers can become roars.